There is a long-debated question. If we were to give the most accurate definition of life, what exactly qualifies as life? Is having free will the essential characteristic of life? Why do some quantum scientists suggest that the fundamental difference between life and death is order versus chaos? According to traditional biology, life forms are composed of cells as their fundamental units. Essentially, this means that these cells continuously renew their chemical components. This viewpoint, based on Darwin's theory of evolution, acknowledges the progression of life from inorganic to organic matter, linking inorganic substances in nature to life itself. However, opponents of this view argue that the formation of life is highly coincidental. For example, in a different biochemical environment, or on another planet, the life forms that develop might be entirely different from those on Earth. They might not even be organic. Therefore, defining life as necessarily organic is seen as somewhat absolute. As a result, more scientists have chosen a different approach. They attempt to define life by its functions and manifestations. For instance, some scientists define life by its abilities to self-replicate, metabolize, and evolve. Others define life as a system that can flexibly adapt to its environment, with the essence of life's processes being information transmission. All these viewpoints share a commonality. They define life based on the structure of earthbound organisms as we know them. However, the more fundamental science, applicable universally across the cosmos, is physics. Regarding how to define life, Nobel Laureate and quantum physicist Erwin Schrödinger offered an explanation from the perspective of quantum mechanics. He stated that the essence of life is to avoid internal disorder and resist entropy. What does this mean? For example, imagine a pile of chaotic, disordered blocks. Although it may initially appear disordered, by applying energy, we can create order and maintain that order. This is also what life does. Taking organisms on Earth as an example, every living being on this planet is composed of cells. A cell is like a small robot based on proteins, with specific functions that give life its unique properties. It is separated from its surroundings by a wall, creating internal order. It self-regulates and maintains a stable state. It absorbs energy to sustain life. It grows and develops. It responds to the environment. It evolves. And it can reproduce itself. So, why do some quantum scientists suggest that the fundamental difference between life and death is order versus chaos? Why is having free will not considered the essential characteristic of life? Welcome to the book club. This episode, we will be discussing the book Life by John Brockman. Is free will the essential characteristic of life? We often say that the fundamental difference between life and non-life is free will. Life forms can always actively choose their behavior. However, the example of the parasitic protozoa Toxoplasma gondii makes people question whether life truly has free will. It might even overturn our traditional views of the food chain. Toxoplasma gondii is a common parasite, and its hosts can be various warm-blooded animals. Neuroscientist Robert Sapolsky from Stanford Medical School discovered, through research, that Toxoplasma gondii can only reproduce most effectively in a cat's intestines. So, if Toxoplasma gondii wants to increase the survival rate of its offspring, it needs to find a way to be excreted from the cat's intestines, and then find its way back into a cat's intestines. At this point, mice unknowingly become intermediaries that help spread Toxoplasma gondii. Mice and other rodents often eat cat feces. One evolutionary strategy that Toxoplasma gondii attempts is to control the behavior of animals as much as possible, giving cats a greater chance of eating the infected mice. However, making it easier for cats to eat mice is not an easy task. In the lab, if you put some cat urine in one corner of a cage, a mouse will run to the other side. This is because cat urine contains pheromones, and when a mouse smells cat pheromones, it feels fear. So, what does Toxoplasma gondii do? Sapolsky found in experiments that mice infected with Toxoplasma gondii no longer respond to cat pheromones. Instead of feeling fear, the mouse becomes attracted to the cat's scent. The mouse becomes excited, even boldly approaching to investigate the cat's scent without fear. This behavior is deadly for the mouse, but it increases the chances of the mouse being eaten by the cat, thus allowing the Toxoplasma gondii parasite to find a new host. Toxoplasma gondii doesn't just make mice so brave, it can also cause changes in humans. Sapolsky mentioned some neuropsychological test results, showing that compared to healthy individuals, people infected with Toxoplasma gondii are 3 to 4 times more likely to die in car accidents due to reckless driving. So, why does Toxoplasma gondii cause organisms to take risks? Recent research in life sciences has discovered that Toxoplasma gondii's genome contains a mammalian gene that encodes an enzyme used to synthesize dopamine. In other words, Toxoplasma gondii controls the host's behavior by influencing the chemical substances in the host's brain, making the host more excited and prone to taking risks. The example of Toxoplasma gondii shows us a survival skill evolved by this parasite. While Toxoplasma gondii might seem like a primitive protozoan and mice, cats, and humans appear to be advanced mammals, Toxoplasma gondii has found a clever way to ensure the continuation of its genes through evolution. The control that Toxoplasma gondii exerts over animal behavior challenges our preconceived notions about the inherent superiority or inferiority of life forms. From the perspective of gene survival, all organisms have evolved strategies that are most advantageous to them. All the life forms we see today are successful survivors adapted to our current environment. In fact, the term evolution might not be entirely accurate. Later, we will discuss an example involving finches, which will show that in the process of life's evolution, life forms can not only evolve, but also degenerate. Returning to the example of Toxoplasma gondii, it prompts us to rethink our concept of free will in life. What we typically refer to as free will is the ability of life forms to control their own destiny, to actively make choices and take actions among various possible options. But the example of Toxoplasma gondii delivers a harsh reality check. The personalities and behaviors of what we consider higher mammals can be altered by a tiny parasite. The notion of free will in life suddenly seems less reliable. Moreover, as our understanding of computer programs deepens, we increasingly see the similarities between computer programs and the programs set by DNA in living beings. This leads us to question whether life truly has free will. Life seems to always act according to the program set by our DNA. What we think of as free will may actually be just the execution of the program our genes have set for us. Take humans as an example. People, driven by rational and health-conscious choices, try to avoid excessive sugar intake. But many find it hard to resist sweets, even though they know that too much sugar can increase the likelihood of obesity, raise blood sugar, blood lipids, and blood pressure, and accelerate aging. The reason behind this is that our genes are programmed to make our brains release dopamine when we eat sweets, making us feel excitement and pleasure. Our genes have programmed our bodies this way because, in prehistoric times, food was scarce, and the high energy content of sugar could be stored in the body to help people withstand hunger. Even though food is abundant now, the genetic program still makes it hard for the body to resist sweets. Whether we acknowledge it or not, the primary task of the program set by our genes is to ensure the continuation of genetic information. Perhaps we are not as independent as we imagine. Our so-called personalities and lifestyle habits, like programs on a computer, have always been controlled by the program set by our genes. You might ask, hasn't life been evolving all along? Why haven't our genes evolved to develop programs more suited to our changing environment? The answer is that life can evolve, but it can also degenerate. Next, let's look at an example involving finches. This example makes us rethink the process of biological evolution. When Darwin traveled to the Galapagos Islands aboard the HMS Beagle, it was the similarities and differences in the beak shapes of finches on different islands that inspired his new thinking on the origin of species. Later, American evolutionary biologist the Grants also conducted long-term observational research in the Galapagos Islands, yielding many new discoveries that made us rethink the mechanisms of life's evolution and Darwin's theory of evolution. What impact does a drought have on the beaks of the birds that survive on the island? When food is abundant, the birds on the island have various beak shapes and strengths. After the natural selection following a drought, only those birds with strong beaks capable of breaking open the hard shells of plant seeds can survive by finding food. This means that when the environment becomes harsh, birds will evolve traits that allow them to adapt to the environment. However, the environment doesn't remain constant forever. What happens if the living conditions improve? Let's continue with the example of bird beaks. After the environment improves, a species will experience ongoing hybridization and integration. Through their observations of bird beaks in the Galapagos Islands, the Grants documented both aspects of this process. On one hand, when environmental conditions worsen, species evolve special functions to adapt to the environment. On the other hand, when environmental conditions improve, these species that had started to diverge will begin to hybridize and produce offspring. This hybridization doesn't seem to be evolution, but rather a kind of regression in physical functions. In fact, many human bodily functions have also degenerated compared to our ancestors. This is because humans are intelligent beings who, unlike other creatures, don't just adapt to their environment, but also modify it to make it more livable. This means that the conditions of human living environments have improved, but at the cost of certain physical functions degenerating. Apart from our brains becoming more developed, we can no longer jump from tree to tree using strong limbs as our ancestors did. We have lost the strength and agility in our limbs that our ancestors had. Furthermore, the improvement of material living conditions has made intermarriage between different human groups more common, which is also an example of the human species integrating as environmental conditions improve. This is the lesson we learn from the example of bird beaks. Not only do organisms evolve, but they also degenerate. When environmental conditions worsen, species will evolve characteristics that allow them to adapt to a specific environment, leading to species separation and the emergence of smaller populations. When environmental conditions improve, these species, which had gradually been diverging, will start to hybridize again. While hybridization reduces the organism's ability to adapt to certain special environments, it promotes biological diversity. This is our understanding of life from the perspective of biological evolution. A more fundamental science than biology, one that applies universally across the entire universe, is physics. As we mentioned earlier, in addressing the question of how to define life, quantum physicist Erwin Schrödinger provided a definition from the perspective of quantum mechanics. He said, "The essence of life is to avoid internal disorder and resist entropy." So how did Schrödinger identify the essence of life through quantum mechanics? The essence of life is to resist entropy. Under what circumstances can we say that an object is alive? Schrödinger, with his quantum mechanical perspective, answered that life means an object continuously does something to maintain stable internal order, such as constantly moving or exchanging materials with the external environment. If a system has no life, then when placed in an isolated environment, all its motions will quickly come to a stop due to various frictional forces, just like the electricity in a battery gradually runs out, or a fire in a hearth gradually goes out. These lifeless objects will gradually turn into a heap of inert matter. Physicists refer to this state as maximum entropy. In 1865, German scientist Rudolf Clausius first introduced the concept of entropy, a unit that measures the degree of disorder in a system. Schrödinger tells us that entropy is a measurable physical quantity. At absolute zero, the entropy of any object is zero, and as the temperature rises, the entropy of an object continues to increase. The greater the disorder within a system, the greater the entropy. The lifeless state we mentioned earlier, this inert condition, is actually the result of increased internal disorder within the system. When a system reaches its maximum state, the temperature throughout the system has already become uniform due to heat conduction. So the state is also known as thermal equilibrium. Let's consider a few examples. For instance, when a bottle is quietly sitting on a table, its entropy is minimal. If you throw the bottle on the ground, it shatters, and its internal structure becomes chaotic and disordered, increasing its entropy. This increase in entropy is often referred to as entropy increase. Another example is when a person runs for a while, sweating and breathing heavily. The originally ordered organic matter in the body is consumed and expelled as carbon dioxide and water, increasing the disorder within the body's system. This too is a manifestation of entropy increase. From these examples, you might notice that all systems naturally tend to increase their entropy, which is essentially the meaning expressed by the second law of thermodynamics. Any isolated system will spontaneously evolve towards a state of maximum entropy, meaning it will naturally become more disordered. This principle applies to everything in the world, including living beings, whether walking, breathing, or a heartbeat. All living organisms are constantly increasing their own entropy. When does this increase in entropy end for living organisms? When a living being's entropy reaches its maximum, all the atoms that make up the organism will return to the universe in the most chaotic state. Dust returns to dust, soil returns to soil. So, clearly, the endpoint of entropy increase is death. It's easy to see that for life, a continuous increase in entropy is very dangerous because, once it reaches a certain point, it results in death. So, how do living beings cope with this in order to continue living? The answer lies in the theme of this discussion: life survives by decreasing entropy. What is negative entropy? It's easy to understand. Since entropy measures the degree of disorder in a system, negative entropy refers to the reduction of that disorder. But how do organisms introduce negative entropy from the outside? This process is very familiar to us. It involves eating, drinking, breathing, and sleeping. In biological terms, this is referred to as metabolism. In other words, living organisms introduce a series of negative entropy into themselves through metabolism to counterbalance the positive entropy produced by life activities. It is on this basis that Schrödinger proposed his view that life lives off negative entropy. He said that organisms have an amazing ability to concentrate order and organization within themselves, or to extract order from a suitable environment, thus preventing their atoms from falling into disorder. From this perspective, the wonder of life lies in its ability to continuously obtain negative entropy in a world where entropy is always increasing. Schrödinger's statement was groundbreaking. He directly addressed the most fundamental physical principles of life, using quantum mechanics to explain the core issues of biology. Following this theory, we can offer reasonable explanations for many life phenomena. For instance, have you ever wondered why our bodies constantly emit heat? From the standpoint of entropy, body heat emission is not a random occurrence, but a necessary action. Because our bodies are constantly generating entropy, they dissipate heat to lower internal temperatures, which effectively removes excess entropy. Similarly, why are warm-blooded animals more energetic than cold-blooded ones? This too relates to entropy. Warm-blooded animals have higher body temperatures and a greater temperature difference with their environment, so their bodies dissipate heat faster. This means that entropy can be dispersed more quickly, enabling warm-blooded animals to engage in more intense life activities, run faster, jump higher, and have sharper minds compared to cold-blooded animals. Based on Schrödinger's discussion of life and entropy, we can extend these ideas further. Life is in a constant battle against the tendency of entropy to increase and cause disorder. If entropy is allowed to increase unchecked, life will inevitably come to an end. If someone chooses to live recklessly, they are effectively allowing their life to descend into disorder and increase entropy. Schrödinger has already provided the solution to this problem: live by decreasing entropy. Continuously acquire order from the external world, strive to make your life more disciplined, clear, and organized, and adopt a more positive approach to life. This is the attitude we should have towards life, and the fundamental requirement that life demands of us. Since any system will naturally move from order to disorder due to entropy increase, people have also deduced that the ultimate fate of the universe, and the final direction of life. Does this mean that the universe will eventually descend into chaos and die, as suggested by the heat-death theory? According to the second law of thermodynamics, the universe is also an isolated system. Thus, as time progresses, the entropy of the universe will increase, moving from order to disorder. In September 1867, Rudolf Clausius, who proposed the second law of thermodynamics, suggested that when the universe's entropy reaches its maximum, all usable energy in the universe will have been converted into heat. The temperature of all matter will have equalized, reaching a state of thermal equilibrium. This state is known as heat death. In such a universe, there will be no energy left to sustain movement or life, resulting in a lifeless, dead universe where no forms of life can exist. This is what the heat-death theory posits. When the heat-death theory was first proposed, it caused a significant stir in the scientific community. But will the universe indeed reach this state and become a lifeless void? Some scientists have raised objections to this idea, with one of the greatest challenges coming from Henri Poincaré. In 1890, Poincaré pointed out in his book, The Principles of Mechanics, that any mechanical model can only be applied to finite systems, meaning that in a closed system of finite scale, the motion of objects will start from order and eventually, through entropy increase, reach a state of disorder. However, the second law of thermodynamics is derived from observations of a finite world and thus cannot be applied to an infinite universe. The focus of the debate then shifted to whether the universe is finite or infinite. The doubts surrounding the heat-death theory have continued to erupt due to a lack of fundamental evidence. It wasn't until the 1960s and 1970s that the debate reached a turning point, with the gradual acceptance of the Big Bang model in astrophysics. Evidence from the Big Bang theory shows that the universe is accelerating in its expansion. Furthermore, some galaxies far from the center of the universe are moving away from each other at speeds exceeding the speed of light. We've previously explained the reasons for this in detail in our video The Universe, a Ladder of Life, so we won't go into it again here. Since some galaxies are moving away from each other at speeds faster than light, it means that the radiation and particles between these galaxies will never reach thermal equilibrium. This is because the particles of one galaxy can never transfer heat to another galaxy that is moving away from it at such high speeds. These galaxies, moving apart faster than the speed of light, become independent systems. Finally, humanity awoke from its century-long nightmare, confident that the heat death of the universe would not occur. However, this celebration may have come a bit too early. Although the heat death in the thermodynamic sense will never occur, this does not mean the universe's fate is any more optimistic. The Big Bang theory, which revealed the origin of the universe, also predicts its distant future. One possible conclusion derived from the Big Bang theory is that when the expansion of the universe reaches its peak, the temperature of the cosmic background radiation will drop to its lowest point. At that moment, the universe will begin to contract, and the temperature will rise again. As the universe continues to contract, it will eventually reach a final stage where the universe will undergo a catastrophic collapse. At that point, gravity will become the dominant force, and all matter will be crushed out of existence. Everything, including space and time itself, will be obliterated, leaving only a singularity. So even though the heat death may not occur, the collapse scenario predicted by the Big Bang theory will also spell doom for all forms of life in the universe. Of course, humanity, should not despair. Our descendants and other life forms in the universe still have billions of years to prepare for this final endgame. During this time, intelligent life might expand throughout the entire universe. If humanity still exists by then, it would have mastered the use of galaxy-scale energy, allowing it to influence and control the universe's development, much like how humans currently modify the environment of Earth. Humanity could then harness all possible resources to combat this great crisis. Perhaps our understanding of life is limited, and even our comprehension of life and death may have its boundaries. Just as we mentioned before with DNA, we often say that the goal of life is to perpetuate genes. Although all living beings will die, the new entities produced during the life process are DNA. From this perspective, life is merely a collection of material that carries genetic information. Each organism will die, but the DNA within it continues to exist in the next generation through replication in some form. Cells sacrifice their own lives for the preservation of DNA. This means that as long as the genetic code of DNA is beneficial, organisms can continue to propagate DNA information by transforming into energy through aging and death. Thus, the fundamental purpose of life may be to ensure the persistence of DNA information, with DNA being the most fundamental life entity. Perhaps, from the perspective of the universe, the distinction between life and non-life is not so important, because everything in the universe is composed of the same elements from the periodic table. Does this mean that everything in the universe constitutes a living entity, just that humanity has not yet realized this? These are questions left for you to ponder. Regardless of your answer, one thing is certain: from the perspective of universal physical principles, life is indeed always avoiding internal disorder and combating entropy. Living beings exhibit a continuous increase in entropy, gradually becoming more disordered. Therefore, as humans, each life is unique, and we should not choose recklessness in facing life, as it leads to allowing life to move towards disorder and increased entropy. The way to cope with decline and death, as Rudolf Clausius told us, is to live by reducing entropy, continuously maintaining order, and striving to make our lives more disciplined, clear, and organized. This is the appropriate attitude towards life and the inevitable demand of life itself. Thank you for watching Book Club. If you found this episode helpful, don't forget to share it with your family or friends. See you next time.